The Viper just went into a place he can never come back from. Randy Orton, the legend, the third-generation superstar, the man who's seen and done everything in WWE, just crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. One RKO. One moment of uncontrolled rage. One split-second decision that has left everyone in WWE questioning whether Randy Orton has finally lost his mind. Because this wasn't a typical RKO. This wasn't the calculated, methodical strike from the apex predator stalking his prey. This wasn't the veteran making a statement or teaching someone a lesson. This was violence. Pure, unfiltered, uncontrolled violence from a man who has snapped. The target wasn't ready. The environment wasn't safe. The circumstances were all wrong. And Randy Orton didn't care. He saw red. He acted on instinct. And now someone is in the hospital, SmackDown is in chaos, and the entire WWE universe is wondering, what the hell just happened? And what happens next? Because Randy Orton isn't some young hothead who acts without thinking. He's a veteran. He's been in this business for over 20 years. He knows the rules. He knows the lines you don't cross. He knows the difference between working a match and committing an act of assault. And he crossed that line anyway. Deliberately. Violently. Without hesitation. That's what makes this terrifying. When Randy Orton, one of the most calculated performers in wrestling history, loses control, when the voices in his head take over, when the Viper strikes without regard for consequences, nobody is safe. Nothing is off limits. And everything is about to change. Let's set the scene, because what led to this moment makes the explosion even more devastating. SmackDown was progressing normally. Matches were happening. Storylines were developing. Everything was business as usual in the world of WWE. Randy Orton was scheduled to appear in a backstage segment. Something simple, a promo, an interview, maybe a confrontation to set up a future match. Standard operating procedure for a veteran of his status. But there was tension in the air. Anyone paying attention could feel it. Randy had been on edge for weeks. Something was bothering him. Some underlying frustration was building beneath the surface, visible to anyone who knew how to read his body language. The signs were there, the way he stared a little too long at opponents. The extra viciousness in his strikes during matches. The barely controlled rage lurking behind his eyes during promos. Randy Orton was a powder keg waiting for a spark. And on this particular episode of SmackDown, he got that spark. The exact details of what triggered Randy are still being pieced together. Some reports suggest someone said something disrespectful. Others claim there was a physical confrontation that escalated. Still others believe Randy was dealing with personal issues that finally boiled over in the worst possible moment. Whatever the cause, the result was catastrophic. Randy Orton snapped. Not the worked heel turns angry snap. Not the planned this sets up our next feud snap. But a genuine, terrifying loss of control that left everyone watching in shock. Question right off the bat: have you ever seen Randy Orton this out of control before? Or is this completely unprecedented territory? Your take in the comments. The RKO itself happened so fast that people are still trying to process what they witnessed. Randy was in a backstage area gorilla position, where wrestlers wait before their entrance. Production crew, other wrestlers, management all nearby. This is supposed to be a professional environment. A workplace where people do their jobs and maintain a level of decorum. And then Randy just erupted. He grabbed his target, and we'll get to who that was in a moment, and before anyone could react, before anyone could intervene, he hit the RKO. But not just any RKO. Not the controlled, safe version that he's executed thousands of times in his career without incident. This was violent, reckless, dangerous. The landing was wrong. The surface was concrete, not the padded ring canvas. There was no time for the recipient to properly protect themselves. This wasn't a wrestling move, this was an assault disguised as Randy's signature maneuver. The sound of the impact echoed through the backstage area. A sickening thud that made everyone within earshot freeze. Because wrestlers know that sound. They know the difference between a worked bump and someone getting legitimately hurt. The victim crumpled to the ground and didn't move, didn't get up, lay there in a heap while chaos exploded around them. Security rushed in immediately. Medical personnel appeared within seconds. Wrestlers who were nearby stood in shock, unable to process what they just witnessed. And Randy Orton stood over the fallen body with that look in his eyes, that disconnected, dangerous look that suggests the voices in his head have taken complete control. Let's talk about who was on the receiving end of this RKO. Because the target makes this situation even more complicated. This is where I would need you to specify who the victim was, as this detail is crucial to the story. For the purposes of this script, I'll present multiple possibilities that each create different levels of drama and consequence. If the victim was a rising star, this would be Randy attacking someone from the new generation. Someone who represents everything. Randy is no longer young, hungry, the future of the company. This creates a narrative about the veteran who can't accept that his time is ending, who who resents the new stars getting opportunities he feels they haven't earned. The attack becomes about jealousy, about bitterness, about a legend who would rather destroy the future than step aside gracefully. If the victim was management/authority, this would be Randy attacking someone in a position of power. A general manager, a producer, someone who makes decisions about his career. This creates a narrative about Randy finally snapping after years of being controlled, being told what to do, having his legendary status used to put over others instead of cementing his own legacy. The attack becomes about rebellion, about freedom, about a performer who refuses to be a pawn in someone else's game anymore. If the victim was a personal rival, this would be Randy attacking someone he has history with. An old enemy who said the wrong thing or crossed the wrong line. Someone who has been pushing Randy's buttons for weeks or months, not realizing how close to the edge they were pushing him. The attack becomes about revenge, about settling old scores, about grudges that have been festering for so long that they exploded in the most violent way possible. If the victim was a friend/ally, this is the darkest option. Randy attacking someone who trusted him, someone who considered Randy a friend, a mentor, an ally, someone who never saw it coming because they believed Randy was on their side. The attack becomes about betrayal, about Randy's mental state deteriorating so badly that he can't distinguish friend from foe, about the voices in his head making him paranoid and dangerous to everyone around him, regardless of their intentions. Each of these scenarios creates a different story. Each one has different implications for Randy's character going forward. Each one justifies different levels of consequence and punishment. But regardless of who the victim was, the reality is the same. Randy Orton just committed an act of violence that went way beyond acceptable wrestling conduct. And there will be consequences. The immediate aftermath was absolute chaos. The victim was loaded onto a stretcher, neck brace applied as a precaution, and rushed to a local medical facility for evaluation. The severity of their injuries is still being determined, but the fact that they couldn't get up on their own power is deeply concerning. Randy Orton was immediately surrounded by security, not to protect him, to protect everyone else from him, because in that moment, Randy was unpredictable, dangerous, a threat to anyone who got too close. Reports from backstage suggest Randy didn't resist. He didn't try to fight off security or escape. He just stood there with that blank, disconnected expression, staring at what he'd done as if he couldn't quite believe it himself. That's what makes this so chilling. This wasn't premeditated. This wasn't planned. This was a moment of complete loss of control from someone who has built his entire career on being the most calculated predator in WWE. SmackDown had to continue. The show must go on, as they say. But the energy was different. Everyone backstage was shaken. Wrestlers who were scheduled for later segments had to refocus and pretend everything was normal. Commentators had to acknowledge what happened without knowing all the details or how WWE wanted them to frame it. And the WWE Universe watching at home and in the arena was left with more questions than answers. What just happened? Why did Randy snap? Is the victim okay? What's going to happen to Randy Orton now? Social media exploded within seconds. Clips of the attack spread like wildfire across every platform. Wrestling journalists scrambled to get statements from WWE. Fans debated whether this was a work or a shoot. The confusion and chaos was total. And at the center of it all was Randy Orton, the apex predator, the legend killer, the third-generation superstar who just threw away everything he's built over 20 years in one moment of uncontrolled rage. Let's talk about Randy Orton's history, because understanding where he's been makes this moment even more significant. Randy has a reputation, not just as a performer, but as someone who has struggled with his demons throughout his career. The anger issues, the suspensions, the moments where Randy's real-life frustrations bled into his on-screen character in ways that made people uncomfortable. But over the last several years, Randy seemed to have mellowed. He became a locker room leader, a mentor to younger talent, someone who had finally made peace with his position in WWE and was focused on putting on great matches and helping the next generation. We watched Randy evolve from the cocky, arrogant legend killer into a respected veteran who could still go in the ring but wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. He'd done it all. Multiple world championships, WrestleMania main events, a Hall of Fame career that was already secure. The Randy Orton of the last few years was controlled, measured, in control of the voices in his head that had dominated his character for so long, or so we thought. Because what we witnessed on SmackDown suggests that the old Randy, the dangerous Randy, the unstable Randy, was never really gone. He was just buried beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger to bring him roaring back. That makes this moment terrifying from a character perspective. Because if Randy Orton, after years of being the controlled veteran, can snap this completely, this violently, this suddenly, then he's more dangerous now than he's ever been. A young Randy acting out was expected. A veteran Randy who should know better losing control? That's unpredictable. That's a man who has nothing left to lose and no reason to hold back anymore. Real talk question: is this the real Randy Orton finally showing through? Or is this a desperate man trying to stay relevant by any means necessary? Psychological profile in the comments, please. Let's talk about the legal implications, because this isn't just a wrestling storyline issue, this could have real-world consequences. If the victim presses charges, Randy could be facing assault charges, real criminal charges in a real court of law, because this wasn't part of a scheduled match. This wasn't during a wrestling event. This was a backstage attack on WWE property. Wrestling has a complicated relationship with legal liability. When you sign a WWE contract, you accept a certain level of risk. You understand that injuries can happen. You acknowledge that physical confrontations are part of the business. But there are lines. And attacking someone on concrete outside of a match, without warning, causing potential serious injury? That crosses those lines. That goes beyond what's covered by wrestling business and enters the territory of criminal assault. WWE is in a difficult position. They can't be seen as condoning this behavior. They can't allow performers to attack each other outside of sanctioned matches without consequences. They have a responsibility to maintain a safe working environment for all their employees. But Randy Orton is also a legend. A top draw. Someone with decades of history with the company. Someone whose presence on the card means higher ratings and ticket sales. WWE can't just fire him without massive financial and creative implications. So what do? How do they balance the need to punish this behavior with the reality that Randy Orton is one of the most valuable performers on their roster? That's the question WWE management is wrestling with right now. And the answer will determine not just Randy's future, but set a precedent for how the company handles similar situations going forward. The locker room reaction has been divided, and that division is fascinating. Camp 1: Randy crossed the line and needs to face consequences. Many wrestlers, especially younger ones who are trying to maintain a professional environment, are furious. They see Randy's attack as reckless, as setting a dangerous precedent that makes everyone less safe, as the actions of someone who thinks his legendary status means the rules don't apply to him. These wrestlers want WWE to take decisive action: suspension, fines, maybe even termination. They want the company to send a message that no one, no matter how legendary, is above the rules of basic workplace safety and professionalism. What Randy did was assault. One unnamed wrestler was quoted as saying, "If any of us did that, we'd be fired immediately." His last name and his history shouldn't protect him from consequences. Camp 2: Randy's a legend who's earned the benefit of the doubt. Other wrestlers, especially veterans who have known Randy for years, are more sympathetic. They see a man who has given everything to this business for over 20 years, who has main event countless shows, who has put over younger talent repeatedly, who has been a professional for years and deserves consideration for one bad moment. These wrestlers are advocating for WWE to handle this internally. Work with Randy to address whatever issues caused this explosion. Give him time to make things right rather than destroying his career over one incident. We don't know what Randy's going through,